Alright, this time the quick speed shot. Back working on the 40 Mercury here. We're going to be working on the trunk floor, starting to fab some of that in. And I've got a mock-up bumper on here just to see what the car is going to look like with the 41 Ford bumpers I'm going to be using. So stay tuned, we're starting it right now. I'm a professional, don't try this at home. Okay, before we get into the floor, I got this rear bumper mocked up here. I'm using 41 Ford bumpers on this car. It's a lot of people, they sell a lot of customs back in the late 40s and early 50s on these style cars. They would use 41 Ford bumpers. It's a 1 year only bumper. A lot of the early customs you'd see would be running probably about 3 or 4 different types of bumpers. You'd see either a 37 DeSoto bumper, which was smooth and had a bunch of ribs in it. It was like curved with a bunch of tight ribs in it. You'd see 37 DeSoto bumpers. You'd see 41 Ford bumpers, and then you'd see, and a couple of years later, and after 1949, you'd see 49 Plymouth bumpers, which are a little bit taller and they're more of a rectangle with big ribs on them. A lot of times you'll see those on these cars when they've been customized in the mid to late 50s. I have a 49 Plymouth bumper, but I always think they look a little big and bulky on a 39 to 40 Mercury or a 39 to 40 Ford. I think they're a little bulky. So I like the 41 Ford bumpers. They're a little bit rarer. You don't see them as much, and you see them on the early customs. So I'm trying to do this car as like a 57 to 64 time period. It's real tricky with a 39 to 40 Mercury. There's so many of them done back in the day as like late 40s, early 50s customs that when you get away from that look, they just, you know, they seem to want to be built a certain way, and then when you build them another way, like make like a zoomy street rod or whatever, or build a car without bumpers, they just don't have the look of the 39 to 40 Mercury, in my opinion. So I want to put the bumpers back, put bumpers on this car, back on this car. So we're going with the 41 Ford bumpers. This bumper is all freaking wadded up and wrecked and twisted and banged up. I've got 2 better ones. I'm just using this for mock-up because the irons aren't on it and I can slide it up here and move it around. But what I'm going to do is have it be about, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches away from the tailpan. The plate's going to mount on the bumper. It covers up the Ford logo that's in the bumper back here. There might be a license plate guard. I might fabricate that and put the license plate light in it. So I just wanted to get a look at this before I jump into the floor, just to get an idea. Because the tailpipes are here and I can use them to set the bumper up on. So I want to do the first section of floor up in here. One thing I did off camera is my square tubing going across here. I realized that the drive shaft, I don't think it's going to sit that low, but there's a chance I could have hit that. So I went and I bent up a piece of 1-inch flat stock that's pretty thick, and I made a hoop in it that will clear the drive shaft. And there'll be a little bit of a tunnel left over here, but it's easier to do it now than put the car together and have it hit the floor. So I did that. It's about 1/2 inch lower than the sheet metal, so I can tunnel right over it, no problem. So I want to make this piece of flat sheet metal in here first. We're going to make it out of 18 gauge steel, just like the wheel tubs. And I was going to try and make the whole floor up in one section, up and over and bend it, but it's going to be so big, and with the angles, I want to bead roll it too. I think it'd be easier just to make this front piece and make this top piece, and you know, put it in one piece at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and get a dimension of this real fast with a tape measure, and we'll get out the 18 gauge. We'll cut that out. It's going to plug weld right to the steel tubing, and then this piece will plug weld onto it as well. And there's a tiny little bend here. We'll use the brake to break that up. We'll just go and spot weld it right in. I also attached the original floor to this tubing. I used an 1.5 inch strip of 18 gauge and just overlapped it about 1/4 inch, skip welded it. That'll get all seam sealed and put together. So the original floor is attached to that 3/4 inch tubing right now. Okay, I got my sheet metal out here. I got a piece of 18 gauge, and I've laid out my first panel here. It's kind of hard to see because the marker had a hard time drawing. The marker's getting old, and I've got a little bit of damage on the edge of the sheet, so I centered up the piece in the center so I could cut the damage off both sides. And then this little bit of surface rust, I'll hit it with a DA with like 120 grit and sand this all up shiny before we put it in the car. I just got the metal slid in here fine. It's going wheel tub. The wheel tub looks good. It's sitting up here on the tubing, but I can't slide it all the way ahead yet. It's tight in here like a tiger because I got to trim out for the transmission tunnel here. So what I'm going to do is I've marked it here. I'm going to trim it so I can get it to sit up on this 3/4 inch tubing. And I'm going to have to put a bend in this lip so things at a 30 or 40 degree angle, it'll be able to sit down on here flush. And then I'll take some string or tape and we'll draw out some lines and we'll make a where it's got to be cut around for this dry shaft tunnel is going to come in and then fade away into the center of this here. So we'll, then I'll trim this out from hand. But I want to figure that out so I can figure out where my bead rolls are going to be in here because I got to bead roll this for strength so it doesn't oil can. Okay, I trimmed the piece out here. We're over at the homemade brake. I bent up a little angle dangle finder here. Just see how much I got to bend this piece up to. It looks like not very far. Let's see how can we figure this out about there. Here we go. Handy little angle dangle here. Looks like we went just enough there. It's good in the middle, just a little high on the outside, but I can push that down. But it can, actually I can push the whole thing down. Let me just bumper just a little bit there. There we go. Here we go, got our bend right on there. It's going to work out good. Nice. I'll slide it back up in the car. Okay, it's working out pretty good here. The lip's sitting down on the tubing. It'll clamp down. I got my lip up here on top. You can see clearance around this so I can set this down flat. Not bad at all. Alright, with this I got it clamped down in place so I can't slide. I just got to do a tiny little bit of trimming. I got a little bit of overhang on the little bit of the tubing here I can trim. It's about an 1/8 inch I'll trim it here, but I want to figure out where this tunnel is going to be, and I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do that, but hold on, wait, I think I got to figure it out. Take this little scale here. We can come off the scale. Look straight. As long as I hold the scale tight to the sheet metal, I can mark it. A bunch of marks around here. And it'll draw it around. It'll draw on here. Here, that finishes up the tunnel piece. Now I'll get the floor welded in, but I wanted to lay this out so I know where the bead rolls can go, so I can trim this part out. But then I can make a nice tapered piece and finish this tunnel out. This will all be under the rear of the seat. The rear seat will be up in the air above all this, so none of this will impact anything, but I want the room for the drive shaft clearance. Okay, I took the DA with 120 grit and I cleaned up the panel. I got the rust off it. I've laid out my bead roll lines. I just want 4 inches. This is 16 inches from the top edge to this bend, pretty much. So I just want 4 inches, 3 sets of 4 inches. This will give plenty of strength to this panel. I'm going to use the big round bead roller and put a big bead into it. And it'll put the bead facing down. And it'll really stiffen this up. And I also used the cutter there, and I cut out the hole for that drive shaft tunnel. So we're ready to fire up the bead roller. I'll probably put you on the time lapse. You can watch me bead roll this panel right quick, and then we'll also drill the holes for the plug welds in these edges here, and then we'll slap it in the car, and I think it's about ready time to get her welded up in there. Okay, I don't know if you could tell in the time lapse, but bead rolling panels puts a lot of distortion into them. Usually you take, if you have English wheel, you pre-stress the panel, and then when you bead roll it, it stretches metal and it takes it back flat. So I don't have a bead roll, so this panel's got really wrinkled up putting them bead rolls in there. You can see it's way up in the air. I thought maybe I could help by putting a smaller one in the center, but it really twisted up here good in the middle, and it'll mush down pretty good. But I've got to do a little bit of work around where these, you see where it's stressed here, it's made a little dimple. I'm gonna push this and work it. I can work and flatten it out. When I went through the bead roller, it was like hanging out the back and curving on its own, and it's not perfect. Kind of got away from me a little bit. It creased the die creased it here a little bit. I'm going to try to work this out with the hammer and the dolly a little bit, but it kind of wrinkled it up pretty good. I wasn't really prepared for this much warpage, but I'm going to try to get it straightened out the best I can. First I'm going to work it by hand and try to work it back in, but just be aware that if you don't pre-stress the panel, bead rolling does do a number on it. Well, I'm definitely no sheet metal expert here because it's still got quite a crown. I pounded a little edge in here. I thought I could take up some of the shrink. It actually made it worse, a little bit worse. But, well, it took some of it out here. It's a lot flatter on top. But I'm going to clamp it in the car, get it clamped in place, and then I'm going to work this edge. This will give me a little bit of an edge to lay the sheet metal on to make the tunnel and give it a little bit of strength. So I got to work it a little bit more here. I think it'll clamp down pretty flat. If this is the exterior of the car, it would be a problem, but under the floor it's going to be fine. But hey, I got the piece clamped up in here. It kind of settled down pretty good. I got some zip screws. I got to get in here. I got some zip screws along the side, on either side here, and I've got it sucked down pretty good. I've got a little bit of an issue here where this piece wants to suck up and down, but when I tie the tunnel in, I'm going to clamp a straight edge across this to hold it where it's got to be, then use the tunnel to hold it, and it'll be like in tension, so hopefully it'll be alright. I got my plug weld hole drilled in here. I'm going to weld it up around the top side, then work to form the bottom when I use this piece for the tunnel. So I've got to do a lot of plug welding now. Got a whole bunch of holes to plug weld in. So hopefully this will come out being alright. So I'm just going to work my way slowly at it, and then we'll see what it looks like. Well, it's looking pretty good. I got her plug weld in all the way around the three sides. I'm working on here. This is actually coming out. I took some of the suck out of it by pulling up on it as I welded it, and some of the heat drew down that suck a little bit. It's got a little bit of a high spot here that goes down like that, but I can draw it up when I put the tunnel piece in here. It's got a lot less of the warp in it than it had before. So that's going to be good. I'll hold it up, but like I said, I'll clamp a straight edge, something thick right across here to lock this right up straight as I fab it, and that'll kind of lock it in. But there we go, I got the plug welds going along. I'll just grind all these down on top, and then a new piece of sheet metal will wrap right over this and go under there. How's it look underneath? Yeah, it looks good here. You'll see all those cool bead rolls as you look down underneath here. The floor will be painted black underneath the car back here, but the frame rails will continue to be yellow. So there'll be a little bit of contrast. But I think it looks good. Looks kind of factory a little bit. And it's a lot better than just having flat sheet metal in there. So, bam. I think what I need to do on this next piece that goes in here is I shouldn't have bead rolled that all in one shot, like the full depth. I think if I crept up onto it, it would have been a little bit less warpage. This piece, I'm only going to put 2 bead rolls in it, and I'm going to be real careful not to warp the crap out of it. But it's a lot smaller panel, so it should be a little bit less tendency to want to warp like that. But I want to still have some structure in here. Okay, I got a piece of steel clamp to this to flatten it out. It's actually is pretty close. It drew down pretty close, but this is locking her in perfectly flat. And I'm making the pattern for this transmission tunnel. I strung up a couple pieces of tape over this, and then I took some masking paper and I laid it over here, and I worked it down and I drew it out. And this will be my pattern for my piece I'm going to cut out here. I'm going to make it out of 20 gauge because it's going to be a little bit easier to fold and bend and shape. The original floor is made out of 20 gauge, and it'll be strong because it'll be all this curve, so it won't matter if it's 20 gauge like that. We got our pattern now. We can cut this out. Okay, here's the piece cut out of the pattern and rounded out. I just had a piece of pipe in the vise and I rolled it here. I've been fooling around with it. Oh! Been fooling around with it down here on the hole. It looks like it's gonna be end up being alright. I've trimmed it a bunch, and what I've got to do is just like hand form it. That's why I made out of 20 gauge, so it'll be easy to work with. I've just got to hand form it down in here and hold it and start tacking it. So I can, I'm going to start here on the one side. I'm going to get a couple tacks up here to the tunnel, and I'll start working my way around. Use the hammer and the dolly and kind of like hammer weld it around here. I'll get it tacked, and I'll roll the edge up from the bottom, make sure it's sealed up tight. Then work it right around to this other side, and it should hammer right down into place once I work it with the hammer and the dolly. Okay, after careful welding, I've got the tunnel piece all welded in here. I ended up fully welding it all the way. I was using the heat to suck some of this panel back down, and because the way I had the edge formed, I hammer welded it on the bottom. I'll go and show you that. But she's nice in here, nice and tight now. Under here, I went and I hammer welded all this as it went, and it got hot. I fused it. You can see it's burned. It's got real nice penetration. I'll hit this with a grinder to clean the bottom up, and then seam seal this. But the tunnel is good. You can see what the bottom of the panel looks like. It took all the straightened it out really good. It's got a little waviness right here by where I double B rolled this because it stretched the metal. But it really came back into shape. The panel came pretty much back into shape here. It's going to look good underneath the car. It's going to be painted black anyways. You won't even be able to see in it. But there we go. Got her all welded up in. It'll get fully seam sealed all the way around to seal it up from the weather. But it looks good. It'll just take a little bit of cleaning out. So let's go ahead and we'll make this panel up here now and get that tied in. Okay, I got the panel made that goes up over the top of that trunk spot. I got Jack here who's going to help me bead roll it right quick. It's got a couple of bends put into it. We'll take this over the bead roller and we'll fire that up. Okay, bam, all done here. Got the piece all plug welded in. Let's see if I can turn this around. the bend came out real tight here. I used some zip screws and pulled it down tight, but it looks good. It rolls right down into the bead rolls going down in here into the tunnel. So it looks like super mint through here. There's going to be a firewall that's going to come down and tie in, let's see, probably right about here. And this will be behind the, the seat. There'll be a firewall to keep fire in case there's ever an explosion in the trunk of the fuel tank and a crash or anything. This is going to be all sealed up here. So this from here back will be the trunk. But this thing's super nice. I just got to hit it with a grinder, smooth all these plug welds up. I ground the wheel tubs around the edge here. I ground the plug welds down below. So I got to hit these, and it's looking mint. I really like it. Came out good. Nice and strong, and got most of the warpage out of it that the bead roller did. It's a little, got a couple little whoop-de-doos in it, but you guess what? Underneath the seat and underneath the trunk floor, it's good enough for what we're doing here. So the last step is I just got to box these two pieces in here, and this is just going to be flat sheet metal. I'll take the bolt out. I'll drill the bolt, the floor, weld right to this spacer here, and then it's going to weld into the side of the body. I'll just tack it here. I got to grind all this down, and I'll tie all that in. So I'll put these in, and then this last piece here down below, I think I might put a little toolbox down here, but I haven't figured that out yet. So I'm going to leave this open for now, but I'll get all this dialed in, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so good progress in this video here. Got that floor all kicked out. Like the way it came out. Got a little carried away with the bead roller there, put some warpage in the panels, but I was able to get it out by working the metal around, and it came out pretty good. It's about 95%, but it's good enough for under the seat and all that. And the other side of the car, the floor will be black, and then you'll never see it on the inside under the carpet, obviously. So good enough. It doesn't rattle. There's no oil canning. It's nice and strong, so it came out good. It's sealed up good. I'll seam seal it all up before I paint it and seal all those seams up. So that'd be nice. And next couple of videos are going to be working on the firewall, like I said, getting that figured out, working around the trunk some more. I want to start thinking about getting the bumpers put on, and then I can blow the rear suspension out of the car, paint and primer and paint the whole underside, clean up their axle, put all new brakes and stuff on that, get that together. I still got to get the drive shaft shortened, and then a couple other things, get the back of this car together and back down. Then up front, we're going to do some work up front later on with the car, the front suspension, and I gotta take the transmission out. So got a ways to go on the 40 Mercury, but still got a little bit of winter left, so hopefully I can get this thing done here before the warm weather hits, and we'll slam around the road and take it for a spin. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. Putting out videos Wednesday and Saturday, and I'll see you again at the Quick Speed Shop.